Welcome to Coffee Conversations with Les and Paul, 30 Minutes for God.
A podcast sponsored by Piedmont Road Church of Christ and Ministry League.
We're here to discuss Bible topics just as if we were asking Jesus himself. I am Paul Sperlin.
And I am Les Sandifer, and we hope you will enjoy our relaxed Bible-based discussions.
Thanks for joining us as we think about and talk about all those things we'd ask Jesus over a cup of coffee. Welcome to the show today.
Oh, I thought you were just going to start saying it again.
Welcome to the show today.
Welcome to Coffee Conversations.
We're happy that you're here with us.
He uses his radio voice, and I love it.
Yeah,
love it.
It happens sometimes.
We have a very special guest on our show with us today.
Oh, we're going to jump right into that.
Pretty excited. I want to just go ahead and say his name because I feel like at some point in conversation right here at the beginning, we might say it as if we know he's here.
And they don't.
And the audience didn't know it.
Yeah, we need them to know that he's here.
All right, go.
And we are happy to have with us today Lonnie Jones from Huntsville, Alabama. I've given his bio like 1,000 times already today, but you know Lonnie. Lonnie is part of one of our other podcasts here for the Ministry League, and so we are excited to have him with us with all of his experience and all of his love of his family and of the church. And he's with us here today at Piedmont Road as part of our Relationships Day, our health and wellness once a year, and he comes in, does this for us each year, does a phenomenal job. And so known Lonnie for 2 or 3 years, and so
wow,
maybe 2 or 3 more than that. But hey,
how many years is it really
of what
that you've known each other?
I was 16. We don't have to do the math.
Well, now we don't. You didn't have to say 16. You could have just said 50 years.
Yeah, because I'm 30. So there's that.
Yeah, there's only Lonnie.
No,
come on.
I'm not though.
It's not that kind of podcast.
Yeah, you can't see, but I threw a flag when he said he was 30. Let's review that call.
Yeah, that's what we do. We explain the visual that they can't see. So
that's funny.
Yeah, he literally just threw a flag with his face.
That red flag. We got to review that.
What's great is, and I will say this, and I may pause and say things during this show and the next one. This is a 2-show situation, folks. But there are times, I actually was able to work at a congregation that Lonnie had been to for years. And what's awesome is when I went to work at this congregation, he's still in town, and he's been in town, and he was there for me all the way through. And he helped me with the bumps, the scrapes, and where the Band-Aids go and things like that. And he was always there for me. And he knew it before I knew it because he had dealt with it before I dealt with it. And I honestly don't know if I could have gotten through ministry without this man.
Was that also in the Huntsville area?
It was very much in the Huntsville area.
Okay. Have you been in the Huntsville area, Lonnie?
We moved there in 1986.
Oh, and ever since?
Yes, sir.
Have you been with the current congregation for a long, long time?
Meridianville is where I'm presently worship and working, and we've been there 12 years.
Okay. That's pretty good.
12 already.
So
wow.
Moved into Huntsville to be youth and family minister at Memorial Parkway Church of Christ. And then when I got my degree, I offered to do their youth ministry for free as a parent-based ministry until my daughter graduated.
Oh, wow.
And I understood that they might choose to have a guy in the office full-time. And so they chose to go with that model. And then the church at Maysville, I had worked with their minister, Tim Orbison, at Memorial Parkway for 10 years.
Okay.
And Tim said, hey, we'll take part of that part-time action. So I went over there and worked with them for 14 years. And then they made the decision. Now, I was concurrent youth and family,
okay,
but also running my private practice. So it was a family-based youth ministry, a lot of parent volunteers. The theory was, if I die or get abducted by the aliens, the youth ministry will keep moving because it was parent-based. And
that's a good model.
But we grew to the point that the leadership said, hey, we probably need to put a guy on staff.
Yeah.
And so I got a position with Meridianville. We did 2 or 3 things. They hired a guy that didn't work out, and they put me back in the youth ministry position.
Okay.
And then I talked to the elders and said, is it still your intention to have a full-time guy on staff? And they were, yeah. I said, well, if you hire a guy and I have to leave, there may be a problem. So let me leave, and then you hire a guy. And so I took the position, super, super part-time. I don't have an office at the building at Meridianville, but I'm the intergenerational minister. And
so no option for you in that prior spot to take the full-time position? That wasn't
No, it would have required me to close my private practice.
Oh, I got you.
And I had, I've been in private practice since '98.
Okay.
And my goal was to be a bivocational or self-supported minister because that allows me to live where I want to live and not suddenly, oh, by the way, you're moving, which
Yeah.
happens in churches. And
Yeah.
we had the intention of raising our daughter in one place.
Okay.
And then I had seen the power of living in the same town, if possible, your whole career. You have such a bigger footprint
Yeah.
of influence. And, I've been in Huntsville since #86. I started the police chaplaincy in '92. So, I've been a local minister and a police chaplain, 32 years as a police chaplain. And so, there's the guy that runs our range is the son of the first guy I helped train with
Wow.
SWAT. So there's a lot of generational legacy there. And I just think that's super powerful if you can do that, and everybody can't do that.
Right.
But we were blessed and able to be, long-term residents.
But you
in
kind of set
Huntsville.
yourself up for success there by thinking the way, with some of the things you chose to do with the private
we were
practice. and
definitely
stuff.
blessed. I'm not going to say it's my wisdom or
Right.
But we had some doors open up for opportunities, and you knock on the door and say, "Hey, can I come into your school? I'm a youth minister." No, thank you.
Yeah.
You knock on the door and say, "Hey, I'm a therapist and a police chaplain. Can I come talk to your kids about suicide, bullying, self-esteem?" It's like, "Yeah, come in. How many classes you want?"
Every time.
So it's pretty
Wow.
cool. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, what's the private practice? I mean, you've kind of described around it, but I thought it'd be interesting just to say what you focus on.
So my model is based on the idea that a problem is defined as a lack of resources,
Okay.
and a dysfunction is defined as a misuse of resources. So you come to my office, we decide, are you missing resources or misusing resources?
Okay.
And so here the person is at point A, they want to be at point B. What do you need to get there?
Okay.
And sometimes that's education, sometimes it's maturity, sometimes it's experience, sometimes it's brain chemistry, but whatever. And so, I try to, and I do what's known as solution-oriented brief therapy.
Okay.
So I don't see people every week. In fact, I have a high turnover. And so rather than, hey, when a person calls and sets up an appointment, you're going to have 8 contacts. We may meet once.
Okay.
We may meet once a month. We may meet twice. And so over the years, I had a high volume of turnover rate.
Okay.
So I always have openings in my practice. It's never, are you still accepting patients? Yeah, I am. Probably the lion's share of it is relationships, kids, parents.
Okay.
Then
That's interesting. Yeah.
Then depression and trauma. I have some specialty training in eye movement desensitization reprocessing called EMDR.
Wow.
And it's the people who do EMDR will tell you it's not hypnosis, but it's a kissing cousin to hypnosis.
Okay.
And so I do some trauma-informed hypnotherapy, and I'm also trained with John Conley in rapid resolution therapy.
Wow.
And so so families first, anxiety, depression second, and then probably trauma is what I really, really like to do. And that's the other part of my practice. And then I travel. I'll do seminars for churches, but also do seminars for companies. So I have a consulting part. I'm like right now, I've been under contract this year to do de-escalation and crisis intervention for Mazda Toyota. I've done several universities on how to deal with difficult people on campus. I wrote a little book called Grappling with Life, Controlling Your Inside Space, and it's 10 principles based in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I do that either as a lecture, here's the 10 principles,
Okay.
or I come in and we put a mat down and I teach you the principles. And so it can be a lecture or a self-defense seminar, whatever you want to do. I do that a lot at corporate events.
That could be some serious counseling, Paul.
But you've written three other books, correct?
Yeah, I have.
At least 3 that I know of.
I have the youth ministry book that Ministry League
Right.
controls.
Pedagogue.
Called Pedagogue. And then I've got a book on spiritual mindsets based on Carol Dweck's mindset. I was doing some sports psychology. I'm not a sports psychologist, but when you do psychology with sports, it's called sports psychology.
Yeah,
Although
that's true.
I can't have the title. But I was doing that, and I read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, and I began to think that those same mindsets exist in the church. So there's a book called Cognitive Spiritual Development, and it's about the fixed or growth mindsets in spirituality, and I basically take the 4 sects in Judaism and talk about the modern day Pharisee, the modern day Sadducee, the modern day Gentile, and then the modern day Essene, and talk about that we either believe we are smart, gifted, and talented spiritually, or we believe we're not, and it basically is a Christ-centered approach to spiritual self-esteem. And then
that sounds like something else we could bring it back for over here.
Well, he did that last time, and we
did
brought
he? Okay.
those, and we talked about those too. Actually, both those books, The Pedagogue and The Cognitive, was 2 of the books we made available to folks last time he was here. But he also did a children's book.
Well, I've got a children's book called If I Were a Mouse, and it's a game I used to play with my daughter when I would put her to bed, and it's about differences. So if I were a mouse and you were a bear, could we be friends? And we talk about the differences.
Wow.
And it's a kind of like a poem. It has a repeating verse in it, and it talks about ages and sizes and disabilities and colors. And then I did this really
that's
weird.
cool.
I really did this really super weird thing. I got obsessed with dragonflies, and used to draw guys riding dragonflies.
Oh.
And that turned into, hey, I'm going to do a graphic novel. And then I did this really deep dive into selfishness. And so I wrote this, it's kind of a C.S. Lewis type thing called The Selfish Real. And instead of it being a graphic novel, I wrote it and I drew in the margins. And Joey Sparks helped me set it up, and it's available. But it's it's called The Selfish Real, a story about a decision. And so it takes place in the mind of a guy. And we talk about the realm of thought, and you talk about the flow of thought. So you have the river of thought, and the river of thought gets backed up by the entanglement, and it's controlled by this entity called self.
Okay.
And so the things that live under the surface are called your motives, and they're illustrated by giant snapping turtles.
Wow.
And your dragonflies are impulses. And if you control an impulse for very long, it'll disappear. But if you can get on an impulse and go anywhere for a limited amount of time, but if you ever control it, and there's all kind of metaphors and stuff like that, but it's about this little creature named Cher who's trying to get out of the selfishness, get out of the entanglement, and share with someone.
Okay.
And it's the battle of fighting the entanglement and the entanglers and the motives and the lust. And it's a weird deal.
How do the dragonflies play into it for Cher?
They're the impulses. They represent the impulses.
Okay.
So they can show up anywhere and fly in any direction. And so he gets on one to get away.
Okay.
And of course, instead of just letting it take him wherever, he controls it.
Okay.
Well, if you control an impulse, it begins to fade. And so he can't ride it very long because he's controlling an impulse.
God, it is so weird because in my head, not the topic, but it made me think about an experience we've had over the last couple of years at our house, because just all of a sudden there's a lot of dragonflies flying around outside our window. And you talk about impulses and how they fade. The dragonflies might be there for 2 or 3 hours, then all of a sudden there's no more dragonflies. They'll come back next day.
You ran out of mosquitoes.
And I guess that's what they're. Now, we live right across the street from a lake, one of the lakes in our neighborhood. But up until the last couple of years, I don't remember having this experience with the dragonflies. But I'm almost thinking it was providential. The dragonflies came into my life so that I was prepared for this conversation with Lonnie Jones.
So if you've got any flowers that
we do
bring in pollinators,
yep.
Then you also have other things.
Yep.
And the dragonflies will follow the plants. Jackie grows plants in the garden to attract dragonflies and pollinators and praying mantises. And
wow.
So we have the lady gardener since she retired. So that's what I call her.
It sounds like we could talk a whole podcast about that book.
Yeah.
Dragonflies and so on and so forth, and all the things swimming under the surface. I like it.
It's an interesting read. It's not very long. It's super short. It went from being this huge novel to I just crammed it into. I can't remember the guy's name. I think his last name is Simmons, at the church at Murray, Kentucky. Gave me an iPad. I was doing a men's conference and he was taking notes on it. And I said, "Hey, can I see that?" And I drew a little bit with it. And I got to church the next day and I had this iPad Pro, and this deacon said, "Somebody gave this to you. Don't ask any questions.
It's yours."
And so I wanted to do something cool with it. And so I drew this little book totally on the iPad and wrote and then drew in the margins and then had it self-published.
And where can you get it?
It's on Amazon, and it's under the title The Selfish Reel.
Okay.
And a reel is a tiny little, we sing that song, The Rocks and the Reels and
Yep.
the Veils. Well, a reel is a tiny little stream.
Okay.
And so you block up a little section of thought that's selfish, and it floods and becomes a backwater and a swamp. And it's this giant area that is controlled primarily by self.
And it's RILL.
Reel.
Okay.
Yeah, The Selfish Reel, a story about a decision.
And I think that all the books that Lonnie has written are available on Amazon.
Yeah, they're on Amazon. And
Okay.
the only one I don't have direct access to is The Pedagogue, because I gave it, in Ministry League wanted to clean it up and really publish it. I had self-published it, and it was a dumpster fire. And Paul said, hey, if you'll clean that thing up, we'll put it out. And the idea is to provide one for the youth ministry majors at the major universities.
Okay.
If we ever sell enough, the excess money goes to providing that to those guys.
Oh, nice.
And I don't know. They're in Ministry League basically owns it and they control it. I have any idea what it
What
does.
happens is when Lonnie calls me, I need 20. I'm like, you got it.
Okay, all right.
That's how we get. That's how we do.
Okay.
I try not to abuse that, by the way.
No, we need to do more of that. To be honest with you.
And if you wanted that book, can you get it at ministryleague.com?
No, you have to go to Amazon because Amazon took control of it. so
Okay.
so
All
they
right.
have it, but we make a phone call and they we don't. It's not a phone call; it's an email, and they send us whatever we need. We order them like everybody else does. So
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
but
yeah.
it's a good book.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah,
So one of the great things about doing this is that we're kind of in a family of people that do this, and I mean by that podcast. We talk about it, Lonnie, on every single show that we do. We make reference for the audience to ministryleague.com primarily, and there are resources for podcasts. And I'm saying this again for the podcast audience to let you know that among those many podcasts is the one that Lonnie Jones does. And
yeah.
I did not realize it, but Paul said this morning during our worship service that it is the most popular.
It is. It is by far
One
the
that gets
most
the
popular.
most hits?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
I may be a little biased, but I'm pretty sure you're close to the top.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, there's some good stuff on there.
There are, and some of his stories and some of his.
No, I meant the other podcast. There's some good stuff on there. I want to talk about mine.
There's something. That's right.
If you go to my
Lonnie doesn't
podcast-
do that, but I'm going to do that for him. But he's right. I mean, if you can think of an area of ministry, or family, or raising kids, or preaching, or anything, sports, anything, it's on there. There's over almost 60 podcasts that are there, and you see it on your feed like I do mine. They're popping up all the time, and you see different things like, what's happening here? And I look at them like, did we have that one? So kudos to Caleb Sampson, the director of that, and making that happen for us all. Appreciate that. While we're talking about this, not to take a commercial break, but let's take a commercial break.
Yep.
And let's thank Ministry League for being the holder of all those things for us.
Yep.
Go
True
to ministryleague.com to do that. Also, thank you to Piedmont Road, Church of Christ, our elders who oversee our work, and they do oversee our work. Go to that website, lifeinchrist.com, and check all the resources there, resources on the church website, lifeinchrist.com, and ministryleague.com to find Lonnie's show, this show, the Revelation show, and so many others that you can gain access to. So we paid the bills, and now it's back to the show.
Yep. And this show is 30 Minutes for God. We talk
It
about
is.
coffee conversations. We asked Lonnie before we came on air what his favorite coffee was. Lonnie?
I don't drink coffee.
So that makes that part of the show very short when he doesn't have a coffee, but we can talk about
does.
coffee anyway.
I've had 3 cups in my life.
What?
And I can tell you when and where.
Is it a taste thing?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
just I don't drink hot liquids, and I don't like the bitter taste.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, my wife's the same way. She tried to go through a phase because I drink coffee. She tried to go through a phase where she was, it's a thing. We
Now,
drink
if you want
coffee
to do
together. but-
ministers and monsters, hey, give me that, that 0 calorie, 0 sugar Monster Energy drink, and I'm your man.
You and Dale Jenkins, right? Isn't that what he drink? What does he drink?
He
Isn't it
drinks
Monster
Red
drink?
Bull. He drinks Red Bull.
Red Bull.
Red Bull.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and he keeps the tabs and on a keychain or something when he's traveling.
It's a party in a cup. It's a crazy thing that's happening there. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's not nearly wired enough for somebody that drinks Red Bull like he does, because he doesn't bounce off the walls like
Well,
you would
without
expect him to.
diagnosing, You give stimulant medication to children with attention deficit disorder, and it normalizes their brain. That's all. I'm just saying. That's an observation. It's not a diagnosis.
Sorry, Dale.
There, I said what I said. All right.
And he does listen occasionally, so
Well, now he's got some insight into himself.
there we go. Now that we're here, and I don't know how much time I have left, doesn't matter. Let's talk about your show.
Okay.
Keeping Up with Jones,
The Lonnie Jones
the
podcast.
Lonnie Jones
Adventure.
podcast, and adventure, and adventure, because everything's an adventure. I don't know how, why, or what happens for this to occur, but the steps that Lonnie Jones makes and the things that he does, for some reason, that adventure seems to follow him everywhere that he goes. It just happens. Things just occur. It's life, and I get that. But talk to us about the adventure of Keeping Up with Jones. Talk to us about the show.
Basically, it's a show based in that every life lived is life learned, and so everything has facts, concepts, and applications. And even if you tell a story, you don't ask, is it true? You ask, is there some truth in it? Mm-hmm. And so you look at the facts. What did you see? What did you notice? And you take those facts and you can generalize and make a concept, and then from that concept you make an application.
So how do you come up with your content? I don't know how often you drop the podcast. Is it weekly?
Once a week, yeah.
It's every week on Tuesdays.
We're 19 episodes into season 5.
So what drives the content week in and week out? Have you already got some idea of where you're going with it over time?
Well, I did a series of bulletin articles, and I was restricted to 64 lines. So I couldn't do anything deeply theological. So I would tell a story and make a brief application. That's kind of what got my mind thinking this way.
Okay.
And then as a facilitator on a ropes course, you come to my ropes course and you do an activity, facts, concepts, applications. So my mind is locked into that. And so I've got the 800 bulletin articles that I wrote as a full-time minister sitting back to be used.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I recycle some of those. And then just week to week, I keep notes on my phone. Something will happen to me. The podcast coming up this Tuesday, I was sitting in a hunting blind in Arkansas and was watching the squirrels and the crows fight over a pile of corn.
Wow.
And a group of crows is called a murder. A group of squirrels is called a scurry or a dray. And so the squirrels and the crows, are in, and it's funny just sitting there watching nature. And then a tiny, a little bitty gray hawk shows up, and the squirrels scatter like you blown up a squirrel bomb.
Okay.
How does a squirrel know not to be afraid of a crow, but to be afraid of a hawk? The hawk is smaller than the crows, but the crows are big and the crows fly. They have beaks and talons. And we generalize, hey, this person's this color, and I'm scared of them. This person's a cop. They do this or that. This person's of this religion. This person's
right.
Well, a code word on the ropes course for a person that we don't trust is called a squirrel. And we give people a red helmet on the ropes course if we designate you as a squirrel. We don't tell you you're a squirrel, but all the other instructors know because squirrels are the people who make nuts nervous. And so that was always been our code word for somebody you had to kind of watch. Well, a squirrel, as goofy as they are, doesn't overgeneralize and knows that everything that flies isn't dangerous.
Okay.
Well, if a squirrel can figure it out, a mature person should be able to too. And that's kind of stuff we do with the stories on the podcast.
Cool. And everything in life becomes a potential story.
Just about, yeah. And then these kind of things happen to me, and I don't know if it's providential or if I'm just prone to that vortex of the universe, but nothing ever goes simply for me or normal for me.
I think the answer would be yes.
Yes.
Because it's probably a combo of the two.
And it's just a lot of fun to find those lessons. And I have several people tell me, I really don't like your podcast. I just like to know where you go with it. You start this story, and I want to know what you're going to do with this.
That's funny.
They're addicted not because they like it, but because they can't not finish it.
Yeah, I have to know.
And you've already said this, but I love the intro to the show when you say, we've had bulletins, but we're gonna, instead of writing it, we're gonna talk about it,
right,
and just put it to life. That's pretty cool. We really appreciate.
And then the reverse crazy thing is that we have an agreement with a lady with World Christian Broadcasting, and she is doing the manuscripts. Sue Irwin is typing up the manuscripts, so they were in print, and now we've talked about them on the show. And then she does the manuscripts for us, and we're going to publish each season as a book. if you want to use it as a devotional guide. And,
Wow.
And so you take these little lessons as discussion starters or whatever. And I tell folks it's a really light introduction to Christianity. Now, there's Christian principles, there's a Christian worldview.
Yeah.
I'll quote scripture, but it's not like a Devo, and
Right.
it's not like a lesson. But the eternal spiritual principles are there. Truth is truth, regardless of where it comes from.
Yeah.
And so it's a real easy, soft intro if you have somebody that you want to introduce to Christian principles. And then there's also a lot of psychology in it too.
So I had mentioned before we came on the air that I really wanted Lonnie to get into a subject matter that we had done, he had done in a lesson for us here this morning. But as it turns out, we've covered enough ground that we're not going to have time to get into that on this episode. But Lonnie has graciously agreed to hang around with us. So I will tease you with, Mr. Listener, Mr. or Mrs. Listener, that stick around next week, and you're going to get part 2 of this discussion. And we're going to have him talk a little bit about the concept of selfishness versus selflessness with an application from his real-world experience. I just wanted to throw that little teaser out there before we quit recording this time.
Yeah, this has been a special show, and will continue to be next week's too. So please stay tuned.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you guys for letting me be a guest.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not often that we have the opportunity, folks come in, and so it's nice to be able to sit and just.
And Lonnie, thanks for
tell
coming
us
back
your
next
life.
week for the next show.
Hey, I
really
appreciate
right.
that. Yeah.
for all the wheels and everything, all the places you go, and he takes time to come all the way back here just for this.
Yeah, it's not a long journey over from Huntsville, so
It's not.
it's not.
No. For Lonnie Jones,
It'll be a
Les
strangely short
Sandifer,
trip this time.
I am Paul Sperlin. This has been Coffee Conversations with Les and Paul. 30 minutes for God. Thank you for being with us. We look forward to being with you over that next cup of coffee.